Welcome to Citizen Extra on this Monday, the 23rd day of October 2017. My name is Wahiga Mwaura. Now, when Kenya's history books are written, this last week of the month of October 2017 will definitely stand out for many historic reasons. It is the week that the nation is slated to hold its first ever repeat presidential election after the Supreme Court annulled the August 8th poll. It is also a week where a section of the country could boycott an election and instead hold demonstrations across the country. Indeed, all eyes are now on three men: President Uhuru Kenyatta, NASA leader Raila Odinga, and IEBC chairman Wafula Chebukati, because over the next couple of days, their every move could determine the future of this nation. President Kenyatta, in an exclusive interview with Citizen TV yesterday, made it very clear that the supreme will of the people must be expressed at the ballot box before any other matters can be discussed. Meanwhile, NASA leader Raila Odinga is asking IEBC chairperson Wafula Chebukati to quit and not oversee Thursday's poll. We're also monitoring poll agency IEBC this morning as they are set to hold talks to review the security situation ahead of Thursday's poll, as statements from Jubilee insiders suggest it is unlikely that Uhuru will meet Commission Chairman Chebukati as requested. Meanwhile, if you've had a chance to grab your newspaper, all of them full of editorials this morning calling for sobriety. The Daily Nation is stating that whatever happens, let's give peace a chance. The Business Daily has gone on to say that Uhuru, Raila can still pull us from the cliff, while the Standard has stated that Uhuru and Raila must put Kenya first in their fight. Indeed, the events of the next couple of days are so crucial to the future of this country and this region that Pope Francis himself, the spiritual leader of the Catholic Church, has decided to weigh in, telling pilgrims and tourists that were gathered for the Sunday prayers that he was paying attention to the Kenyan crisis and praying that the whole country may deal with this current problem through constructive dialogue towards common good. And finally, today, with 3 days to the October 26th poll, we ask you at home to talk to us on 22422 and on social media using the hashtag #CitizenExtra. Given the prevailing political environment, in your opinion, are free and fair polls guaranteed? Given the prevailing political environment, in your opinion, are free and fair polls guaranteed? Talk to us, 22422. I'll try and read as many of your SMSs as we can during, bearing in mind this is the Monday of a week like no other in Kenya. And talk to us on social media as well, at Citizen TV Kenya, on social media, Facebook, Twitter. Use the hashtag #CitizenExtra, and I'll try and go through as much of your feedback as we can. Of course, we are live in different parts of the country, and during the course of this program, we'll be crossing over to Kisumu, Eldoret, Mombasa, Nyeri, to talk to our correspondents there and find out what is happening on the ground. But for now, I'm also very glad to introduce my panelists in studio. I'll start at the far right. We have Dr. Njogu Barua, former Member of Parliament, Kishogo. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Wahiga.
Advocate Karanja Kabage, welcome to the program as well.
Thank you.
Former Vice Chairperson, IEBC, letangule welcome to the program as well. Barak Muluka is also joining us shortly, and we are also, he's the Secretary General, ANC, and we're also expecting Thomas Letangule, a former commissioner at the IEBC, to join us in this program. Talk to us again on social media, send us any questions you may have, and I'll go through them with my panelists. But let me start with them now. A couple of questions just to understand where we are as a nation. Dr. Barua, I'll start with you.
Yep.
So much happened last week, Daktari. Resignation of Akombe, allegations against fellow commissioners by Akombe, and even the chairperson alluded to it. Protests last week, protests starting tomorrow again. Raila adamant no election. The president says there'll be one. Potential protests on Thursday. I don't know if I've captured adequately where we are as a nation. My question to you is, with everything that is happening, is a legitimate election possible? I'll start with you, Dr. Barua.
Thanks, Wahiga, and that's a very difficult question, which can be interpreted in many ways, depending on who is responding to that question and from which point you are looking at it. The way I look at it is that the issue of legitimacy can be drawn from the fact that we are actually holding election on 26th of October. We are actually addressing the determination of a legitimate institution, that's the Supreme Court, which decided that we must hold election in 60 days. 60 days expire on 1st. The other thing is that IEBC is properly mandated to conduct that election, and we have credible candidates. That's Uhuru Kenyatta, we have Raila Odinga, we have a court and others. What, to me, at that point, up that point, the whole thing is credible. What is being the problem is that some people are actually having conditions. When you say that Chiruba must go, that gives the communities some different look at the whole thing. when Chiroba takes leave for 3 weeks,
which I think he starts today,
so that he removes himself from being an arbiter, a referee, then they start saying Chebukati must go. The problem we have is that some people are hell-bent to ensure that elections don't take place. But in my own opinion, is that for us to unlock the potential of this nation and to make this nation move forward, it is paramount that we adhere to the Supreme Court ruling and have the elections on 26. So you look at the pros and cons, positive and negatives. I think whichever election is held on 26 to me is credible, because it's going to give Kenya a better future.
There are those who say that if President Uhuru Kenyatta and NASA leader Raila Odinga sat down and agreed to work towards an election that is acceptable by all, that they could have moved to the Supreme Court, gotten an interpretation that allows the country to hold an election at a different date. And I'm saying this because you said one side is categorical that no election should take place. But I think they are saying, no, it's not that we have a problem with the elections, it's just the conditions under which this particular election is being carried out. How do you respond to that?
I think when I say that, I was not trying to blame one side. I'll just try to
use the word some people.
Yes, one side. At least one side.
Okay.
One side was doing that, but that's exactly what they are doing. In terms of dialogue between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, that should be something that could have been continuous all the way. They should be talking because they have a common interest. The people who have got the highest stakes in whatever you do on 26th are the two gentlemen, Raila and Uhuru. And I think the issue of talking, it depends on what they are talking about.
Okay.
Because finally, when you say this, I say that they cannot talking so that they can influence IBC, would deny IBC the independence.
That's how you interpret it. Okay. Let me get a response to my opening question from Lillian Karanja. I'll come to you. So much has happened. In fact, last week could almost be a year in some countries in terms of all the events that happened. Many asking a legitimate election on Thursday. And I'll give you an example. I actually got a call this week from someone. He has been contracted to do some work around elections. But his call to me was to ask me, as media, what are you hearing? What is Thursday going to look like? Are we going to be safe? etc. Genuine concerns, and I'm sure each of you get called by different people. How do you see Thursday? Should we get out of the house? Should we not? A legitimate election, is that possible on Thursday? I'll come to you for your interpretation now.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question and difficult at this time, because not just national concern about where we are now, but international concern that we are not going to have an election that will look democratic. But remember, IEBC has a constitutional mandate to conduct the election. All the conditions being constant and probably all parties working towards the 26th, we should have an election. But as Barua has said, there have been calls or demands being made by the NASA, if I may be specific. NASA coalition had some irreducible minimums, which they said they have to be fulfilled before we go into an election. And Jubilee on its part had the electoral reforms, which were of course carried out just recently. Looking at both sides, we need to be asking, what are we doing as a nation? Where are we going as a nation? Because remember, the 2013 general elections, we were proudly holding the first election under the new constitutional dispensation. So at this point in time, we still want to be true to the Constitution, and if so, then we must have elections on 26th. But then the question you are asking, the legitimacy comes in, the credibility comes in, and all these questions which we have to look at and analyze before this Thursday comes. But I think the IEBC, having a constitutional mandate, has set the date. What we are seeing is that there is a political misunderstanding which could lead the country into a crisis.
We are talking about a political misunderstanding, but from what Dr. Akombe spoke about last week, and I'm curious to find out your reaction when you heard she resigned, and then that press briefing by Wafula Chebukati, is it really political, or is there more? Because for all intents and purposes, the issues they raise is that the IEBC, as it stands, is a divided house. There are different factions speaking within. There's a lot of political interference. That doesn't worry or concern you, that as much as we are saying elections must happen, but nevertheless the referee does not seem to be fully in charge of those elections?
Of course it does concern all of us, and in particular those of us who've been there. We know that you cannot just have everything smooth We also had our own differences. When we were in the commission, they sacked a certain team. We had our differences. But the bottom line for all of us in the commission then, and always when we were discharging our mandate, was that we'd be true to the Constitution and true to the people of Kenya, notwithstanding the political pressures. The political pressures are always there. And you'll find divisions in terms of this and that. Decisions have to be made. Things have to be done within statutory timelines, within constitutional timelines. But you're not going to just run away and say there's too much pressure. You withstand the pressure because you know you have a mandate to the people of Kenya and not to the politicians.
Okay, fair enough. I like the way you described that. I'll come back to you and we'll talk a bit more about that. Karanja, I can give you a chance now to give your opening statement. The legitimacy of the Thursday election, bearing in mind everything that has happened so far, especially the events of last week.
Well, thank you. I'd like to take 3 dimensions to this question. One, when we passed our new constitution, we created institutions. And specifically, if we go to chapter 15, we created constitutional commissions and independent offices. And those offices were created not by accident. They were created to serve a purpose. Where did the rain start for beating this country? In 2016, we bundled out a legitimate, a constitutional, and a legal commission because there was a clamor that we must change the new team. We must change.
One of whom members is sitting right next to you.
Exactly, yeah. And I'm glad I met her for the first time, but I want to speak for them. I was opposed to that, and I'm still opposed to the way we bundled those people out. Why? Because we created an illegal and unconstitutional avenue of removing people from office just because a certain group or a certain individual felt that it is my way or the highway. All right? And that is something that I was very concerned about because I said there is no provision in the Constitution or the law to remove either a commissioner or a commission in the manner and in the fashion that we did. But the political class collectively
sat down and
agreed, let these people resign. And there is no provision in our constitution for en masse resignation of the commissioners. But for convenience, we agreed that's the way. What did we do? We created in the mind of Kenyans that the constitution or the legality doesn't matter in this country. It's a whim of individuals. So now we are benefiting or we are suffering the consequences of short-termness and political convenience. That's the first thing that we did. And that's why now today, you cannot tell people that don't go to the street to demand that IBC commissioners and staff should resign as a way of creating a path for you to be elected or not elected. Let me just, because it's very, very important. So why did we do that? Now this is despite a very express judgment of the Supreme Court, the Raila Supreme Court 2017. Article 2, page 386 says, and I quote, it's very, very important. Regarding prayer I, which was the staff of the commission and the commissioner committed irregularities, what did the court say? The court said, we have shown that IBC did not conduct August 8th, 2017 presidential election in conformity with the constitution and electoral law. That's what they said. Irregularities and irregularities were committed also in a manner inconsistent with the requirement the electoral system ought to be inter alia. Simple, verifiable, efficient, accurate, and accountable. Although, this is very, very important, although the petitioners claimed, that is Raila and Kalonzo, that various electoral offences were committed by the official of the first respondent, IBC, no evidence was placed before us to prove this allegation. What we saw in evidence was a systematic institutional problem, and we were unable to find specific fingerprints of individuals who may have played a role in commission of irregularities.
Fair enough. I need to speed you up in the interest of time.
Yeah, but I think I'm not finished.
Okay, briefly.
We therefore are unable to impute any criminal intent, culpability, or either first the IBC or the chairman or any commissioner or member of the first respondent.
Well,
now, I want to say this very clearly, because Kenyans seem to imagine that they can create illegality by merely making allegations.
Did Dr. Rosen Akombe make allegations last week?
Totally.
A person working within the IBC...
It doesn't matter, there's no God. Because what he should have done is to go to court with those allegations. Because let me tell you, we have an independent arbiter. That is the court. It doesn't matter what I think.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what anybody says. And I'm just saying this because it's important.
Yes.
The Supreme Court did not find any individual. So when NASA says Chepkati or Chiroba and the staff and the commissioner should go, what is the basis for that? Because they made a player. Good.
You've asked a question. I need to give Barack Muluka a chance to answer. He's just...
I need to respond to you.
Briefly.
Yeah, I need to say
your last statement. Go ahead.
Now, there is a lot of talk about this word legitimacy. That has been talked about. My brother Muluka has even written about it. But let me tell you something. And Kenyans must understand this. We need to unpack the word legitimacy. The word legitimacy is a presupposition that is lawful. You cannot say you're not going to have elections, which is unlawful, because the Constitution itself has said, the Supreme Court said, under Article 143, fresh elections must be held. That is the lawful and the constitutional way. Now, when you start coming up with the issue whether elections will be legitimate or illegitimate, first and foremost, I want to tell you that none of us here is in a position to make that determination. The determination of legitimacy or illegitimacy is the Supreme Court.
Okay.
And therefore, the election must be held. Then you go to court.
Thank you. I will have to stop you there. Barack Muluka, thank you so much for joining us. Newly appointed Secretary General ANC, but we know you from many other forums as well. I was going to give you a chance to make an opening statement, but you've immediately been challenged. Even as you come in, I can give you a chance either to make your opening statement, and I was asking, in line with everything that has happened last week, Akombe resigning, that press statement by Wafula Chebukati, demonstrations that could run up even onto the actual election day. Can we really get a legitimate election? Is it guaranteed that Thursday's election will be free and fair? I can give you a chance to respond to that, even as you weigh in on a little bit about what he's spoken about as you came in.
Thank you very much, Wahiga, and thank you, team and the viewers. When you get into any competitive exercise, certain assumptions are given. The first and foremost assumption is that it's going to be a fair game, that everybody has got equal chance, subject to their own efforts and abilities, and that there is total absence of partiality, total impartiality on the part of the umpire or arbitrators, referee, whatever we may want to call them. That all the technical processes are in order. Even in football, we inspect the goals, we inspect the nets to see whether they are properly in place. We even, and I know that you have covered sports a lot, Waiga, so you understand what I'm saying, that even the football itself, you check it for pressure.
Before you start the game.
For pressure. To say that this one is a ball that we can use in this match. That there are tests that are done. We can even condemn a certain ball and say we cannot use this one. And so when you talk about an election such as this one, which is a non-election in fact, the umpires and the foremost umpire has himself come out And he has said that looking at ourselves as we are constituted as the IEBC, we cannot make an undertaking that we are going to give you a free and fair election. That is the one voice that must speak unequivocally on the sanctity, on the credibility of the exercise that is before us. But if the umpire himself comes and says that we are not sure we can do it, then who else can come and start presuming to speak for them and say, no, they are going to deliver, everything is all right? That is the starting point. And if they are in doubt, we need to be asking them, why do you doubt? Among other things, we have seen them say themselves, we have seen the chairman say that there are people within the establishment who are an impediment to our effort to give this country a free, fair, and credible election. So, if the authority that has been charged with the responsibility is itself in doubt, I cannot say that we are going to have an election that is credible, free, and fair.
Okay, I'll give each of you a chance to respond to that. But President Uhuru Kenyatta, NASA leader Raila Odinga recently spoke about IBC and the chairperson of Wafula Chebukati. I don't know if we can listen to what they had to say, and then I'll give each of my panelists a chance to respond to what Barack Muluka has stated. President Uhuru Kenyatta in an exclusive interview with Citizen TV yesterday, and NASA leader Raila Odinga also talking on the same matter. Let's listen in now.
Kwa sababu tumemwambia Bwana Chebukati, kuwa mwanaume, simama imara, pana kosa sauti, ongea kama mtu ambaye ametoka Ingo. Mwambie wa Kenya, mimi naona hii maneno ni mbaya, tuwezi kutoa uchaguzi wa haki na ukweli tarehe 26. Wakenya wanasimama nyuma yako. Wewe una wafuasi wa Kenya wapigaji kura zaidi ya milioni 10 ambayo hawataki hizi kura.
IEBC, which you've talked about and said that they have assured you that they're ready, have talked about being prepared technically, but the chairman, Chebukati, has also said that the political environment is unsuitable. To that end, he has called for talks between yourself and Raila Odinga. Are these joint talks something that you're willing to go into, and do you have preconditions?
Let me put it this way. Chebukati has been given a mandate by the people of this republic to prepare this country for an election. He has been given the resources by the Kenyan taxpayer to do so. As a government, we have made no single demand on him to do anything other than prepare this country for a ballot.
Kenya's leaders reading from different scripts. President Uhuru Kenyatta says, Chebukati, do your job. NASA leader Raila Odinga saying, Wafula Chebukati, you've seen what is happening in the nation. You need to make a decision. Step away from that election. Do not conduct that election. That is the message from our leaders right now. And before I allow each of my panelists to respond to that, and also to introduce Thomas Letangule, former Commissioner IBC, thank you for finding time to be here with us. Thank you. Let's see what's happening right now in Kwale, Ukunda, where residents there are demonstrating. From what we're hearing, they are stating that they are tired of the current political stalemate and they would like to see an end to it because it is affecting their business. As you know, that part of the country, tourism is a major income earner. That's how residents here get their jobs. Some working, of course, in hotels and restaurants and other businesses, and others, of course, also involved in sales of different products that tourists would use, whether local or international tourists. And so some sort of demonstration happening there, reports that we are receiving from our team there, and those are some of the pictures that we are now bringing to you live from the coast, Kwale, Ukunda, Kwale County, Ukunda, to be more specific, where residents there have been holding demos now stating that, please, can we find a solution to this political stalemate? It is affecting our businesses, our pockets, our livelihood, and it needs to end this current political state that we find ourselves in. So those are live images now, and if I can just take a look that of course it's affected traffic on that road, etc. But these are the images that we are now seeing. Maybe a bit later on we'll be able to hear from them what their grievances are. We have Nikki Gitonga on the ground there, and he'll be able to tell us exactly when they started and what those residents there are saying needs to be done to get out of this particular situation that Kenya finds itself in just a little under, what, 4 days and counting, or 3 days actually, to the October 26th poll, and that is the situation right now. We'll keep going back there as soon as we have more updates. Thomas Letangule, thank you so much for finding time to be here with us. I'll pose the question to you that I posed to each of my guests before I allow all of them now to respond. I asked them, with what we saw last week, the resignation of Dr. Akombe, that press statement by Wafula Chebukati, demonstrations that are supposed to start again tomorrow, and also protests on the election there as well. A legitimate election, is that possible under these circumstances? And that's what we're also asking Kenyans at home.
Thank you, Maura. I'm happy to be in the show. Sorry I came a bit late.
Aribu?
We need to look at this issue in the context of our Kenyan law. We are a country governed by the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Our Constitution is the one which gives us the roadmap to what is the next step. The Constitution anticipates or contemplates any action that must be done in any event. For example, the same Constitution 2010 gives the Supreme Court the power to determine whether to annul the presidential election or not. Under Article 143, that is what it says. But even if you ask me for my own suggestion on the way forward, this particular provision, Article 143, I think we will need in future to ensure this provision is clearly gives the Supreme Court the power on what circumstances it can annul the presidential election. It should not be left to the whims of the court. There should be parameters in which the court is guided in the Constitution. As it is now, it's just left to the discretion of the court. And this must change, but that's another topic for another day. Now, what I'm saying is that under this article, and if you allow me to read, it says that a fresh election shall be held within 60 days. So it's like an order by our own Constitution that in the event of an annulment of an election, the same shall be held within 60 days. So we cannot run away from this because it's in our Constitution. And even to buttress this, the Supreme Court also, in conformity with this article, issued an order that the election must be held within 60 days. And therefore, we cannot run away from this, however much we want to, because it is in our Constitution that we must do it. Therefore, the thing is, the IBC must prepare to have a credible election in conformity with this Constitution and the laws. It must be ready to do this election.
If they are unable to have a credible election, as Wafula Chebukati spoke about late last week.
You know, we cannot operate under theories and saying they are not unable. What we know is that the chairman spoke and said we are ready. I know he mentioned that there are turbulences. And by the way, it is their own making. I have just come with my colleague, Vice Chair, who is here from the last IBC. And we had the same challenges that they are having. In fact, we had more challenges that they are having. I'll give you an example. In the 2013 scenario, the machines completely collapsed. And we were sitting with my colleagues here in Bomas of Kenya, and the machines collapsed. And we made a decision. And we told Kenyans, we communicated and said, Kenyans, these machines have collapsed. Allow us to go the manual way. Allow us to get the forms. And Kenyans understood. What this IBC of 2017 did is that they never communicated. They never said, look, there's a problem with transmission, but we have uploaded all the forms. Because the country needs to be assured. Now, we have a situation where one of the commissioners has resigned in a very critical election. I'll give my own view on that, because I think it's highly responsible for a commissioner who has been entrusted with the duty that it is to resign in the middle of such a situation. But be that as it may, the point is they have a duty for this country. And I think it's time now, before we keep speculating whether they are ready or not, the chairman needs to come out and tell the country, yes, I'm ready. I've seen the ballots have arrived. We cannot say they are not ready when we have seen ballots are already here. The training of the election officers is ongoing.
That's right.
So the primary materials for this election, what we call strategic materials, are already in the country.
Okay. I'll come back to you to get more from what you've said. Dr. Barrow, I can give you a chance now to weigh in.
I think There's an assertion that Wafula Chebukati, I think it came from Befei Barak, that he cannot assure Kenyans of a credible election, and from his statement last time. I think in my interpretation to that is that Wafula Chebukati right now has already said that they are prepared to conduct the elections. But
is that what you read out of his statement last week? That's what you saw?
Yeah, he said, Barak has said, and I agree with him, that Wafula had some doubts about their capability of bringing that conduct that election. But I think what my interpretation now is that Wafula Chebukati could not anticipate the extent of interruption that could come from the people opposing the election. I think that's what he meant. He said he meant we are ready, but
no, he didn't.
Let me finish. He has said no.
He has said on the basis of
okay, fine.
He stated very clearly that looking at ourselves as the IEBC, we have challenges.
Yes.
And he said that I would like to request the people within the IEBC who are an impediment to a free and fair election to step aside. You cannot wish that.
I think I will not wish it away. He said that, but I see what is happening is that, you see now, my friend Barak now is the Secretary General of the ANC.
Indeed.
And it's from the time he got that position, he is going to continue taking partisan positions. That calls upon his position. I'm not doing it also. Yeah. But I'm saying now, whatever he says sometimes, he's actually talking about for ANC. But I'm saying even the vice chairman of IBC yesterday was on television saying that they are ready.
So who do we believe?
Vice chairman.
So who do we believe, Dr. Barua? The chairperson or the vice chairman?
We should believe the commission. They should come up with a consensus.
Thank you.
And tell us.
Karanja?
Let me say one thing here also.
Okay.
Which actually is actually a bigger problem. When this election was ordered by the Supreme Court, NASA dictated that they have some irreducible minimum, and then they use the word must, which must be addressed. So when you have something irreducible and you give Kenyans a condition they must do it, then there's no basis of the negotiations, because they are already stuck on that position. And those negotiations were actually, those conditions were actually aimed at IBC. So it's for the IBC to deal with it, and they'll be dealing with it. Finally, I would like to say about the differences on the commission. We don't expect anything different, because when this committee of 7 from CORD, members of parliament, 7 from Jubilee, that particular, met at Widsa. They went there and made a report. And this report was tabled in parliament. Some of us questioned it when we were told that we cannot discuss the report. I was of the opinion that we should discuss the report and make amendments if necessary. But both parties had agreed that this report was unopenable. One of the conditions, one of the recommendations is that Jubilee is going to appoint this number, CORD is going to appoint the other number. So it means that those members of the commission went there in the commission from a partisan point of view. So when they differ in their meetings, it's not unexpected.
Okay. Karanja?
Yeah. First of all, I think none of us is the IBC.
Yes.
IBC must realize we are at a crossroad as a nation. However much difficulties it has internally, it has to realize there is nobody else in this country that can conduct elections. Therefore, they must hold elections. But as I said, it is not for them to determine whether those elections are legitimate or not. It is not. That is not the purview. It is the Supreme Court. Anybody who has a claim, and they are allowed, an individual or any party member who has a claim that this election was not conducted in a free and fair manner must go to court. And this is very, very critical, because everybody now has become IBC. Listen to what Raida said. He is telling him, you are from the western area of the country, therefore take a stand. What is he telling him? What is he telling him? So, first and foremost, I think it is important for people to realize that in this country, you do your job according to the law. That is the most important thing. Secondly, if you remember what happened when the Supreme Court made a ruling, and I want anybody to listen to what Raida said and Orengo said at that press conference at the Supreme Court. They were not going to have elections. That was very clear to them. Even when they subsequently came out,
you're saying when the first press
conference, just listen to it. No, please.
Sorry, okay.
I want to tell you this.
You're quoting them verbatim, or?
I am telling you, you watch it and you tell me whether you got the nuances.
Okay, so it was not a direct statement. For you, you read in between the lines. I just want to clarify that for the benefit of our viewers.
I also will tell you one.
Yes.
What happened? Subsequent to that, Raila said he has gotten out of the running.
He withdrew.
You know why? When they did that, I want you to look at the commentaries. They said, no, in 2013, Raila Odinga case, there is a ruling by the Supreme Court said, Article 138, 1B, that doesn't exist in the first place. The Supreme Court misquoted a law that does not exist.
138.8B.
Yes, there is not such a thing. We have got 138.1. There is no B. Now, what that said, there was what we call obiter dicta. Obiter dicta. That means an opinion of the court or of a court. But it is not backed by law, neither is it backed by the Constitution. So when they made that statement, what did they say? They expected that because Raila was the only candidate with Uhuru, the moment he abandons that position, automatically the IBC was going to hold election in 90 days. Now that unfortunately was undercut by the decision of Mativo regarding the Okura court. You get what I mean?
Yes.
So there is a lot of dishonesty, and when you hear people talking about legitimacy of this election or no election, let me tell you, first and foremost, people should understand, and I want to emphasize, the word legitimacy presupposes lawfulness. So the moment you start saying election should not be held, Chebukati should not do this, should not do that, where are you getting reference from? Because if we have accepted as a country, we are a country of law and due process. All right? Where are you anchoring your argument from?
Fair enough, fair enough. I need to bring Lillian into this. Lillian, let me ask you, one of the proposals that we now know was defeated by the Commission was that IBC should move to court, seek guidance on how it should proceed in this political climate. If you are in IBC right now, is that a move you would have made? Because there is a worry that should elections happen on Thursday, the next move by any party is to move to court and get that election annulled on various technicalities. Would you advise Chebukati, would that have been a wise move for him to try as much as possible to get the Commission to go to court, seek interpretation on how Thursday will be?
You see, as we've already said, IBC has the constitutional mandate and to conduct the elections. And elections generally elicit a lot of emotions and conflict. And usually the environment is tense. So at every time we handle elections, whether the general elections, whether by-elections, we always have these tensions because of the way our politics are deeply divisive, you know, in the country. So going to court for the Commission, I don't know what they would be saying, because the most important thing is to ensure that the political players are listening to each other. And then the government...
Which they are not.
Yeah, at this point in time,
Jubilee saying, you know what, we're not meeting Chebukati. NASA saying, you know what, we've given up on dialogue now. You know?
The other issue is for the Commission to ensure they have all the materials they need, all the resources they need to conduct the election.
Well, that's sort of the political problem which you began by saying we find ourselves in?
Yeah. The issue now is ensuring that bit is resolved, because remember, Chebukati has already called for consultations between NASA and Jubilee, and we are waiting to see between now and Thursday whether that will really happen and whether it will be fruitful. But what I was also going to add is that the government must ensure there is security. So if there is security and we have an environment which is conducive, and on top of that to ensure there is political stability for that to happen, then I believe that there would be no need for anybody to go to court for an interpretation on whether the election should happen, because the Constitution has already directed us to conduct the election.
Okay.
Yes.
Barak, I'm coming to you shortly. Let's listen into what NASA leader Raila Odinga, President Uhuru Kenyatta had to say about the right to vote. They both spoke about that particular part of where we find ourselves as a country. President Uhuru Kenyatta in an exclusive interview, NASA leader Raila Odinga as well also speaking. Let's listen in.
Just as much as they have the right not to participate, they should not interfere with the right of those who wish to participate. So that on the 26th, all Kenyans, those who desire to vote, those who desire not to vote, must each be guaranteed their constitutional right exercise their will.
Sasa tunaambiwa Chiloma ametoka. Ati ameenda kwa likizo. Anatoka tayari amefanya kazi yake yote. Amewacha watu yake tu. Amejifanya tatizo yeye amejiondoa. Nani mjinga ni nani? Nafikiri sisi ni wajinga sana. Hatuwezi kukubali, sio?
Chebukati, chukua nafasi yako, chukua ushujaa wako na utangaze ya kwamba from where you sit and from what you see and from what you understand and from what you know, there cannot be a credible election in Kenya.
Kwa hivyo hii ni vita yetu sisi sote, na kwa hivyo tunasema tarehe 26 cannot truly be a free and fair election. Hiyo itakuwa opinion poll ya Jubilee.
Ndugu yetu Chebukati, wewe hujaua mtu, hujaibia mtu, wachana na hiyo kazi ya Uhuru na Ruto, kuja ufanye kazi na Raila Odinga.
Jubilee oye! Wangapi wanataka Uhuru Kenyatta aende nyumbani? Nione hapa na mikono.
A snapshot of what your leaders had to say over the weekend. Barack Muluka, let me come to you. If we go into this election as planned by the IEBC and supported by Jubilee from what we are seeing right now, what do you see or perceive as the consequences?
Yes, first allow me to recognize that the odds are 4-1 against me. But I'm equal to the task. Yeah. Yes, I think that's recognition.
I think that's unfair because for example, we are giving a balanced view.
That recognition is important. That the odds are 4-1.
No, I don't think that's unfair. That's not fair because we are neutral. We are partisan. We are not any partisan.
Go ahead. Some of us are giving a balanced view on the law.
Okay.
Okay. So
if that makes my colleagues unhappy, I retract.
No, don't predict him.
Go ahead with this. Go ahead. Go ahead.
But you see, you cannot hold an election in an environment where you are pushing truckloads after truckloads of heavily armed security people in a part of the country which you have profiled as a hotspot. And each time the head of state says that we guarantee there's going to be security, we understand what that means, that we are going to clobber. And if what we have seen in recent times is anything to go by, we are going to shoot and kill people. The police, the government spokesperson, Kiraide, has recently issued a very traumatizing press release. He has said that the opposition are planning to kill people in their areas massively and blame it on the government. And one is wondering...
I wouldn't use the word kill. I don't think you used the word kill.
That was in the statement. If you didn't read it, I advise you.
I think enforcing law and order, but go ahead.
I advise you to...
I don't think I've had any government official saying we are going to kill.
The original statement which Kiraide issued, and he said that the opposition, among other things, going to bribe the courts, the judges, they are bribing the commissioners, and even from a Jubilee platform. If you believe that the opposition is bribing commissioners to take a certain position, does that guarantee you that they are going to then deliver a free and fair election? And this legalism sometimes puzzles me. I hear people who have served in the commission, and with the deepest respect. The Constitution and the court order talked about conducting an election in 60 days. It did not talk about conducting a farce, a choreography, taking the country through motions of what looks like an election. Because an election must pass a certain litmus test. And I don't agree at all with my good friend Karanja Kabage that the IBC has no business in determining whether that which it is doing is free and fair. The referee must be completely convinced. each time before he awards a penalty that it is free and fair. He must know and be convinced at all times that the pitch is good. We have seen referees inspecting the goals, checking the goalposts to see whether they can work or not. And in certain cases, we have seen referees saying this pitch cannot work. And therefore, we have got to do it differently. Legalisms are all right, especially when you talk about periodized legalisms, that we must do it by such and such a date. But you must ask yourself about the environment that informs all these things. You cannot, with the most profound respect to...
he's really been dying to wait. I'll come to Letangule. Let Barack finish.
Yes, I see he's baying for my... he cannot downplay, and Karanja Kabage here as well, the threats to the life of former Commissioner Akombe. We're talking about a context where the issue of Chris Musando is still very fresh. He is a fellow who was killed after he had received very many threats, and this country behaves as if that was nothing, as if nothing happened. You cannot take somebody's life and security for granted. I rest there for the time.
You rest your case there for now. Letangule, briefly respond before we take a break.
Yes. First, Barack, you must understand in this discussion, we are all trying to offer some guidance to the country and to our listeners and to the viewers. The point is, Maura, first, in this country, voting is not a must. In certain countries like Australia, voting is a must. If you don't vote, then it's a criminal offense. You have to be charged. But in our country, voting is really voluntary. It's up to you.
That's correct.
The same way that NASA have exercised their constitutional right not to vie, nobody can force a candidate to vie if they don't want to in our country. It's that kind of democracy that we have. And therefore, what do we mean? Voting right now, if in certain areas voters don't turn up to vote, but the infrastructure is laid out by the IBC. In other words, the IBC must enable the voting by putting infrastructure, ensuring that the ballot papers are there, ensuring that the polling stations are open and accessible to any voter. That must be ensured either by ensuring that there is adequate security to ensure the safety of those who want to vote. But if there is nobody who comes to vote, that is their choice. And therefore, at the end of the voting, if at 6 there is nobody, the result is declared 0 vote for both candidates, 0-0. That is still a result, by the way. So, we must allow the IBC then to do their work. And another factor which is raised is that right now, aspersions are being raised of whether there will be a free and fair election, even before the elections take place. By the way, coming from IBC as I've done, we know this is one election out of 6. They have already accomplished 5 successfully. And we only left with 1 election. This is something very small for the IBC that I left. I mean, it is just 1 election now instead of the 6th election. They should be able to pull it out. They have already rolled out a program. Remember, they said we have a project team. I think the project team is working hard to it. So why should we cast aspersions on an election we have not done? And in any case, we are supposed to judge that election.
Again, it brings me back to my opening question, which was, having looked at what happened last week, this is what I want to ask you. When you look at Akombe's memo, are we saying that everything that she said in that memo was in her imagination? Or if there is an iota of truth, is that something that as a panel we should sit down and discuss? Okay. Having been in that seat,
Maura, I haven't had the opportunity.
Actually, you should be the expert in this case. I can allow you now to respond.
Yes, I haven't had the opportunity to look at that memo in detail. What I know is that if you are given such a responsibility by the country, you don't chicken and run away. And that's another problem altogether. You have a duty as a team to deliver for the country. So when a commission is so divided and taking instructions from all quarters, and I am blaming all of them in that regard, that they seem to be getting a lot of conflicting informations and orders from elsewhere. This is a commission which is supposed to operate independently and without any orders from any quarter. And therefore, although the climate seems to have been set to look like there is some apprehension as to the quality of the election, from the chairman's stand, I think that they are prepared to do this election. I'm saying so because when I see election materials arriving, when I see training of election officials and such kind of preparation, then it gives us hope that everything is in place. And by the way, the court has already spoken and said, the Supreme Court said, if this election is not conducted properly, we will annul it. They have said it. Therefore, the only people or institution which can annul the election or which can say that there were certain irregularities is the Supreme Court. So let us allow this election to proceed. If there are any issues arising from it, then I'm sure the Supreme Court will step in.
Okay. We need to take a break. I can allow you one comment, and then we take the break.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the Akombe statement was really personal. She came out saying the way the commission is at the moment, the divisions, it would not stand to conduct a credible election. We saw the same sentiments being echoed in Chebukati's statement, which I would say sounded very personal. That, you know, the way the commission is currently, he's being forced to accept decisions, and his decision not being taken, decisions that are not really based on law. And I think if you read his statement word for word, you get to a point where he even alludes to the technical preparedness of the commission, meaning that the commission is ready to conduct the election. And then he ends up giving a yellow card and says, wants the politicians not to interfere with the commission. Politicians will always want this and that. I mean, and I said it here earlier before Letangule came, we had the same challenges. Letangule admitted the same, that when we were in the commission, you'd find you're being pulled here, that this is what we want, this is what we want. But you have to stick as a commission and focus on what your mandate is to the people of Kenya under the Constitution.
Is that what you feel gave your commission the difference compared to this one, that you were able to stick together?
That is the difference, and the fact that we were able to come up with consensus building. When there were contentious issues, we would build consensus around the questions that were of grave concern and would agree to go in a particular direction that would be for the benefit of the country. Only once we had to vote, and that was on whether diaspora, Kenyans living abroad, should vote in the 2013 general election. That is the only time we voted as a commission.
But one could also say the difference between the election that your commission conducted and this one is that in your case, the Mutunga court agreed to allow that, you know, agreed with the results that you gave the country, but this time around the Maraga court disagreed with the result that IBC gave the country.
The results were still contentious, but we were able to explain and give a full analysis of how we received the results despite the transmission having failed. And that was the presidential results that only worked up to 44%. The other results were okay. So I think we were able to explain, we gave the results clearly, even from the manual that we received, and imagine that is the law. Remember, that is the law. It allows you to announce the results, the provisional results, but you have to wait for the physical forms to arrive at the bombers so that you announce from there. And this is where now we are going back again, that the returning officer will have to announce physically all the forms 34As, to receive all the forms 34As and announce the presidential results on the basis of all the forms 34Bs received.
Okay. Dr. Barua, you allow you to comment after the break, and Barak, I'll also give you a chance to respond after the break. Karanja, a quick comment from you before we take a break.
First of all, I would like to say that in future we need to be very careful who we appoint as members of the IBC. Correct. Duality of citizenship is something that we must think very carefully, because you have a patriotic duty to your country. Now, when you are a person acting in a manner that the distinguished lady Akobe did, I think for me that's the greatest betrayal of your motherland.
Some call her patriot.
The greatest betrayal of you don't disappear. You do not run away. And the second thing I want to say is this: if you read her statement is very condemning to NASA itself. Now I can see they are praising her, but if you read the statement itself, it's very condemning.
In what way? In what way? Give us examples.
It was saying that the threat to the staff is in NASA territory. That's what she says. And then if you listen to her interview in BBC, she said that the biggest problem in IBC is the weakness of the chairman, who is not assertive. Chebukati, that's what she said. That is her.
What does that have to do with NASA? Or you're now building your argument. Okay, go ahead.
That is what she did. Now she's being held, but she is the one who is saying that the conduct of the NASA area, as far as the staff of the IB is concerned, is causing serious security and safety reasons for the people. And that's why she felt what she felt. And the second thing she said when she was interviewing the BBC, that the weakness, she attributes the major weakness of the IBC to lack of assertiveness of the chairman of IBC. So that's one thing I wanted to say. The second thing I want to say is this. You had earlier on said that the greatest stakeholder of this election is Raila and Uhuru. I want to debunk that.
And it was not me. I think it was one of the...
when you are talking about the people in Mombasa, all right? Okay,
all
right? That's what you said. And I can tell you this. The greatest stakeholder in this election is the poorest of the poor in this country. Why? Because that is the person who is sleeping without food, can't get money for the education, for health of their children, and those are the people who are suffering. And that's why the leadership of this country in totality must think twice. What are their actions? Because the bottom line is, when the country is in the state in which it is of paralysis, the person who suffers most is that person who has no voice. And that's a tragedy.
Fair enough. I think we take a break. On that note, you're watching Citizen Extra live on Citizen TV. Heated discussion here. We'll be right back. We'll carry on with the second hour shortly. Talk to us on 2242. Actually, let me just sample one quick SMS here even as we take that break. You don't give us your name, but you say the solution for this crisis can only be solved by Uhuru and Odinga. When two bulls are fighting,